where we want to go over the primary campaigns that happened this week, many of which are actually still being counted.
Yep.
So to update from the week before, Summer Lee has been declared the victor of that Pittsburgh area race. That's certified. That was an extremely close one. We also have an extremely close, similar race between Henry Cuellar and Jessica Cisneros that appears to have gone to Henry Cuellar at this point. Yep. We'll see by a couple of hundred votes. We'll see. At the very end, Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, came in with a massive super PAC. Clyburn and Pelosi came in to help, which really kind of shook the confidence of a lot of Democratic voters, because this happened a little more than a week after the shooting in Buffalo. It happened on the day of the shooting, not that far away in Uvalde. Henry Cuellar is one of the strongest kind of NRA champions in the House Democratic Caucus. And it happened just a couple weeks after the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade was announced. And he's the last remaining kind of pro-life, quote unquote, pro-life Democrat in the House. And the Democratic leaders are constantly saying, gee, we would love to deliver the things that we promised for you, but it's that darn mansion and that's that darn cinema. But then you get a situation like this, and they do everything they can to push a Henry Cuellar over the top.
And that's the benefit of primary season, is really getting to zoom in on what the party establishment's priorities are, and it would do the same thing with McConnell on the other side of the aisle. The end of the day, all they want is power. So in certain races, if actually they could be convinced that the leftist or the conservative candidate was more electable, yes, remember the Tea Party? I mean, in certain cases where somebody was clearly more electable, even if they didn't really like their policies, all right, we'll get behind you. But in these races, it shows like that's what their priority is. Their priority, even if they're not going to do anything with the power. And that's what to your point, that's exactly what you can see here. Like, they can talk this game as much as they want, but all they want is power, because they can trade on that power without actually having to take tough votes when there are close margins. And
Pelosi and Clyburn came out for Cuellar last time, and when he won by 4,000 votes against Cisneros, and he repaid the favor by joining Josh Gottheimer's, quote, Unbreakable Nine to split the bipartisan infrastructure bill away from the Build Back Better agenda so that they could then kill Biden's agenda. So he repaid them by killing their agenda. They come back and support him again after he did that. So we talked about how last week Kurt Schrader, another one of the Unbreakable Nine, lost his primary to Jamie McLeod Skinner in Oregon. Carolyn Bordeaux, who is a third member of the Unbreakable Nine, was in a primary against Lucy McBath in suburban Atlanta. She got crushed.
Yeah.
And Filemon Vela, a friend of Cuellar's, another Texas congressman, has already quit. In April, he joined Aiken Gump. So he quit Congress.
Hell yeah.
So 3 of the Unbreakable Nine are now gone.
Cashed out.
Cuellar might survive with this 200 vote lead. We have Michelle Vallejo, a progressive candidate challenging a DMFI-backed and kind of a right-wing Democratic-backed candidate, appears to have won by 23 votes in a primary. This is in a lean R district. And again, Unbreakable Nine. This is Vicente Gonzalez's seat. He was one of the Unbreakable Nine. He left because he's running instead in Filemon Vela's district, which was opened up because Vela went to K Street, because that's more Democratic. So they're just constantly giving up Democratic seats to Republicans and then being rewarded for it by Democratic leadership.
Do you remember a time where there were this many nail biters, especially primaries, in this concentrated period of time?
No, because there hasn't been. There haven't been really contested Democratic primaries for the most part over the last 40 years.
And on the other side, another worthwhile update here that actually gets into the same trend is that the Pennsylvania Senate election is headed for a recount. Dr. Oz has declared victory. He's
by less than 1,000 or something.
It is an incredibly narrow margin, and he refers to himself as the presumptive. I think he says presumptive winner of that primary race. It is headed for a recount. There are challenges over mail-in ballots, which is a very ugly, obvious obviously a very ugly thing for Republicans to get into in Pennsylvania, although it could be a clarifying battle.
The count.
It could be it could force a sort of clarification on behalf of the Republican Party, depending on what happens in terms of how they handle these sorts of things. But Dr. Oz was endorsed by President Trump because Donald Trump saw him as the more electable option over McCormick or over Barnett. And we talked about this a couple weeks back, but Barnett actually at the end of the race was able to get support from kind of some people in the MAGA wing who were unhappy with Dr. Oz's connections to China, to his early positions on transgender ideology.
To him being Dr. Oz.
Yeah, and for him being Dr. Oz, exactly.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right. Having all of these connections in Hollywood and in the news media that are displeasing to Republican voters for good reason in this time period. And so you had Trump weighing in by saying his justification for supporting Dr. Oz is that he is more electable, and that was a huge factor in the race as well. So at the end of the day, anytime you look at what Mitch McConnell is doing with his little chess pieces around the country, it's the same thing. It's about electability, and if you have power, you can confirm judges, you can set the congressional agenda, you can do all of those things, sure, but those big agenda items outside of judges and setting the agenda in and of itself, are they going to do anything? Do they want to do anything more than obstruct? That's a big question. How
much do you think this will hobble whoever the Republican nominee is in the end?
How do you mean, like in Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania, is this contested fight over the voting going to make it less likely that one or the other's supporters come out in November? Because in Georgia, you had
I was just gonna say,
all these people saying, well, what's the point of voting? It's just going to be stolen anyway.
Yeah.
And so then they didn't vote. They certainly didn't come out and vote for Perdue, who just got absolutely smacked around.
He got shellacked, and that is a huge point of contention, especially with people who were generally, I would say, friendly to Trump, especially earlier in that cycle, were extremely frustrated with the election rhetoric because they believe that it lost Georgia for them. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because if you're being told your vote's not going, 100%. So I think that's not just a problem in Pennsylvania. I think that's going to be a problem elsewhere. Now, anticipating that, Republican candidates can craft messaging around it. But no, I think that's absolutely a problem going forward. When you have the problem not just in the presidential election, but then one that's repeated in the primary, how they handle this mail-in balloting situation is going to be really crucial. And whether they can, actually weather the storm and say they have faith in the results, that's a big question.
And what about Kathy Barnett's supporters? So these are people. What she wound up with 20+% or so, right?
Yeah, 26%, I think. Yeah.
And so these are people who looked at Trump's pick, Dr. Oz, like, nah. They looked at the McCormick pick, who's the kind of trying to do the Youngkin thing of being the hedge fund billionaire who's going to wear a vest and be reasonable, but also like spout some MAGA stuff. They looked at him and they're like, no, not doing him either. We're with Kathy Barnett. She's the one who's really going to, flip over the apple cart here. So, where do they go in the general if it is Dr. Oz? Or do you think Fetterman, because of his kind of cultural anti-establishment cachet, is assuming that he recovers fully from this stroke, do you think he could capture enough of them that it makes a difference? Or do you think they stay home? I
don't think Fetterman gets a lot of Barnett voters because of some of those cultural differences, and that Fetterman may aesthetically be able to look like, we talked about this, he may look the part of what some of those voters are looking for in candidates, but those hot button cultural issues are the ones that pushed them away from Dr. Oz in the first place, and plus they're voting in Republican primaries, so they're more of the diehard base and less likely to be picked off. That said, if Fetterman runs a smart campaign, I do think he can get people who would otherwise stay home and not vote, or some right-leaners in particular areas of the state, maybe outside Pittsburgh, that area, to come and vote for him. And I could totally see that happening. I doubt that the people who are dedicated enough to vote in a Republican Senate primary would be the ones that would turn out for Fetterman in the general.
Right, yeah. And I was going to say it's probably going to be very close. Pennsylvania always seems to be very close. It also depends on the climate. If this is bad for Democrats as it's looking, But on the other hand, if you have people fired up, if you remember after Parkland in 2018,
yes.
you had this youth turnout surge. So you have that combined with Roe. So maybe that, and there's so much partisanship that maybe that pushes back against the typical midterm malaise that in-party.
I think Fetterman, his biggest obstacle is the easiest, most obvious one, and it's going to be where gas prices are and where inflation is when people are going to the polls. And he's going to have to run a really smart campaign. He sort of talked about that issue in politically strategic ways before, but how he handles it, I think, is going to be absolutely the highest order. That's what's going to be front and center on general election voters' minds. And
we've also barely seen him in 2 weeks. I think there's been a collective maybe 10 seconds of video of him posted since his stroke 2 weeks ago. Now, he needs to rest and he needs to recover. It's not criticism, but we'll see how the recovery goes. If 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, we've still only seen 10, 20 seconds of video, people are going to start to wonder how he's doing.
Absolutely. And I hope and pray that he's doing well. That was, just an incredible situation to happen a couple of days before voting. But such an interesting race. The race in Ohio, we talked about this last week too, between Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance. Just some of these races are going to pit two very interesting arguments from the various parties against each other, and Pennsylvania is absolutely a place where that's going to happen. Ohio, it's going to happen in. So this is going to be this cycle is already shaping up to be really interesting. And just the final point I will say is the fact that these are nail-biting, tiny margins in crucial races where bases are turning out in primary elections. It tells you how divided just each party is in and of itself. I mean, there's always division in parties, but when you're having these razor-thin margins between the establishment and the sort of populist wing, that tells you exactly how deep these fractures are.
Right. And if Tim Ryan were 6'9" and tatted up, I think he'd probably have a much better shot. Instead, he's kind of the yoga and mindfulness guy.
We should swap the candidates. That would be interesting.
Let him run in both.
Yeah. Hey, they're carpetbagging
only
anyway.
One of them, unfortunately. A lot on his shoulders.
All right.
Well, I guess that's it for the show today.
That's it for Rising Fridays. Don't forget, we have our own special little logo here, which I think looks
What day
nice.
is today? It's Friday.
It's Friday.
You're watching this on a different day.
Yeah.
There's also a podcast. Check that out. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss anything. And we will see you next Friday.
I feel like a weatherman or a weatherwoman trying to navigate the green screen when I point.
It's an actual screen. See you later.
See you, everyone. Have a great weekend.